I don't know if you've ever taught a student who has weak listening comprehension. One student I've been helping, whenever I go to his home to talk about learning Chinese, as soon as I walk in his front door, the very first sentence he says to me is, "Whenever I go outside, I don't understand what they're saying." And this can be very frustrating to certain students, particularly because they see other students understanding much more quickly what people are saying, and they are still struggling, missing this, not understanding that. So let's first think about what sort of person is more likely to have weaker listening comprehension. What are their problem areas? The first one is that they're strongly analytical, whereas the intuitive learner just seems to grasp the whole, what the person's trying to say, and is normally right. The analytical has to understand and therefore strongly focuses on every single word in the sentence that the person's saying. And if there's one word they don't understand, they get stuck. And they have to say, "Please say it again." And this is very frustrating because obviously there's going to be many times when there's a word they don't know and they just get stuck there and they don't know what to do. So the strongly analytical student often will have weaker listening comprehension because they're focusing on every individual word in the sentence. Secondly, the strongly visual student, because they like to see it, or they must see it, written down so that they know how to pronounce it or whatever. And that can be a real disadvantage because obviously outside when people are talking to you, nothing is written down. So the strongly visual student as against the auditory student is going to have a problem. Then if they're also a perfectionist, they like to say it right, they like to get everything correct and right, that's going to be a problem. And analytical, visual, perfectionist, you put all those three together and you've got a problem student. They normally have real problems understanding what people are saying. And then if you throw in maybe they're easily nervous or inhibited. The problem with the nervous person is that they're already a bit tense when someone's going to talk to them, and if they don't understand, they might sort of panic or totally shut down, and hence not able to concentrate on what the person's saying. So the easily nervous or anxious person is at a serious disadvantage. Also, the inhibited person, they don't want people to laugh at them. They want people to think they're clever. They're very concerned about their self-esteem. And so these problem areas often result in a student having weak listening comprehension. So what can we do to help this sort of student? Because they're often very frustrated. Three things. How to improve their listening. Firstly, what they need is understandable input. They need to find people who are going to talk to them using language they understand. One linguist puts it like this, very helpful. He says, what these people need is someone talking to them at a level of I+1. What does this mean? I is their present level in the language, and +1 is just slightly higher. You see, the problem with the people on the street outside when I try and have a conversation with them is they don't know my present level, and so they're probably talking at I plus several hundred. And so obviously I'm not going to understand. And so what the student needs with weaker listening comprehension is someone who's keeping their language close to what the learner knows, I+1. So firstly, understandable input, I+1. Secondly, they want to practice in safe places, places which are low anxiety producing. And there's probably only two. One is their home, where they feel safe and secure. And hopefully the other place is in your classroom with you learning Chinese. So they need understandable input. They need you to keep it at I+1. They need to practice in places that are safe. And thirdly, with warm and friendly and particularly empathetic people who are going to help them to relax. So these three are very important for the person who has weak listening comprehension. Understandable input, level of I+1, in a safe place which is low anxiety producing with warm and friendly people. And I just want to say two things about this. One is, what's often helpful for the person with weak listening comprehension is if they can get hold of the recordings of other beginners level textbooks. You see, the problem is they've got the textbook you gave them, they've listened to the recordings lots of times, and they know what's coming next. There's no challenge anymore to their listening comprehension. But most beginners level textbooks are covering those same topics: introducing yourself, buying things, ordering food, giving and asking directions, these sort of things. But obviously other textbooks are going to have the vocabulary in a slightly different order from the textbook that you or they are studying from. And so if they could get the recordings and also the tape, because if they are visual and perfectionists, they'll want to look it up, and they can listen to these recordings in the safety and security of their own home where they're relaxed, and this gives them the challenge of listening to language which is therefore close to I+1. So if you could help them, if they can get hold of recordings of other beginners level textbooks, this is going to help challenge their listening comprehension. Secondly, if you can help them find people and hire talkers. I talked about this in detail in the lecture on personality. But just very briefly here, if they can hire someone who's warm and friendly and empathetic, who comes to their home, who is told, informed what the student knows and what the student doesn't know, this is going to be very helpful for this sort of learner. Remember at the beginning I mentioned this student who every time I went to his home, he said, whenever I go outside, I don't understand what they're saying. And so I asked a friend of mine, a Chinese friend, to go to his home once a week. That friend is very gentle, very warm, friendly, non-threatening, empathetic. And you know, the student, name is Marcus, he just loved that hour each week with this person because he felt free to talk, and the Chinese person kept his language to Marcus's level, and Marcus began to feel good about his Chinese because he could understand what was being said to him. So I hope you find this helpful when you are faced with a student who has weaker listening comprehension.